What year was this thing?
That's a good question. I think it was.
30s, wasn't it?
I think it was earlier. I think it was in the teens. 1916 Traub.
16?
Yeah, I remember the whole story behind it. The two brothers, being German, you know, Americans weren't real happy with them at that time. It was right after World War I. And they had said in their documentary video that that's why they sealed it up in the wall.
The Dayton flying machine. Let's recognise this bike.
Perfect timing for this.
This is actually classed as the world's rarest motorbike. We don't claim it. If you go on the internet and Google the world's rarest bike, I can guarantee every single time this will come up. What makes this so rare? Sorry, there's a lady behind you.
Oh,
You
sorry.
guys are all right,
Sorry.
I can see.
Yeah, that's fine. Anyway, so what happens is, cast your minds back. No, you're going to have to use your imagination because we're going all the way back to 1967. Well, none of you have been born. We're going to, we're going to Chicago. Now, at that stage, Chicago were being knocked down and remodeled and everything else. And so this gentleman had purchased a corner plot of North Carolina Street and Pierce Street. He would employ two Polish plumbers to knock the building down. As the Polish plumbers are knocking the building down, you will hear the bricks thudding on the ground. All of a sudden, the tone of the bricks change when they start hearing it hit something metallic. The first brick, the second brick, the third brick, the fourth, the fifth, the sixth. So what they do is they stop what they do. They get a set of ladders, they shimmy up the ladder, looking over. They're not dropping the bricks into the courtyard outside or into the room next door. They're actually knocking the bricks into a secret cavity they had no idea was there. In that cavity, they could see something underneath a dust chute. And they knew it was an old gangster's trick. Underneath that tarp is this bike in original condition, except at that stage, you couldn't see any of the paintwork. It was covered in dust and grime. Also, the tyres were completely rotten, delaminated. But the Polish plumbers knew anything they could get away with belonged to them. So they had no fear. They actually pulled the wall down. They drag out the bike, they throw back the tarp, realising they've got a motorbike they'd never heard of. It must have some value. So at lunchtime, they push it up to the expert motorcycle in North Carolina Street. It would be the local Suzuki. Now, Torillo and Albert Tachi were not just experts, they were collectors of rare American motorbikes. And what happens is, Torillo and Albert suspect they've got a missing link between the motor bicycle with pedals and a motorbike with a kickstart. They go into negotiation with the Polish plumbers and they would eventually swap a second-hand Suzuki for this bike. Now Torillo and Albert have got no idea what they've got. So they push it into the workshop here, they carefully clean off all the dirt and grime. They would then order new tyres. While they're waiting for the tyres to arrive, they put oil in the engine. Very soon, with compression, spark and fuel, you've got yourself a running motorbike. They would keep this until the late 1970s when a gentleman called Bud Eakin would buy this bike sight on seat. Now we all know who Bud Eakin is. Yes? Yes. Yeah? Some people do, some people don't.
Nope.
Bud Eakin, sponsored by Triumph, one of the world's top motocross, enduro and desert races, winning the international 6-day trial numerous amounts of time. Every single day, come rain, come shine, come snow, come hail, come heat, you have to be at the start line exactly on time. You have to ride for 6 continuous days. Any time you could be stopped, show me your headlight, show me your horn, let me check the decibel coming out the exhaust. Lose a single point, you lose the gold medallion. 5 times Bud Eakin would win the gold medallion for America. But that's not what he's famous for. He was a close personal friend, riding companion and stuntman to a gentleman called Steve McQueen. So you might be aware that in 1963 Steve McQueen makes a film called The Great Escape. based on a true story. However, in that true story, you will never see Captain Schultz, Steve McQueen, capturing that BMW-looking Triumph, and he would be chased by the German army. That was actually Steve McQueen in a German uniform riding a BMW. That famous chase culminates with that jump over the barbed wire fence where Bud Eakin jumped for his good friend Steve McQueen. Now, it wasn't that Steve couldn't do the jump, it was that Steve McQueen couldn't get insured to do the jump. For the self-same reason, in the chase scene in Bullet, primarily, them scenes were cut by Bud Eakin. Again, Steve McQueen couldn't get insured to do it. However, Bud was never credited with them two roles, but in the late 1970s, up in Chicago, he would be credited for making a film called The Blues Brothers. Watch the title, stunt coordinator, Bud Eakin. Now, while he was there, he would get a phone call from his good friend, Steve McQueen. Now, this is really interesting because we only found this out about 6 months ago when Torillo's nephew came to the museum. Al Payne said, well, no, that's not true. Steve McQueen had been a close personal friend with Torillo and Albert because of his collection of rare American motorbikes. And Steve McQueen on that occasion had actually purchased the entire collection of Indian motorbikes off of Torillo and Albert because they were decided to close the Suzuki dealership. Steve McQueen would ring Bud Eakin up saying, come and have a look at this motorbike. And of course, that's exactly what he did do. Now, Bud Eakin, with over 40 years of experience, notices something very unusual about this bike. On receiving this, probably from Steve McQueen's collection, because we don't know if Steve McQueen actually backed the deal to actually have 3 motorbikes, this being one of them. This would actually end up in Steve McQueen's collection for a short period of time. He passed away in December of 1980. Now, Bud would see this bike, he would then call in his experts, who went through this bike with a fine-tooth comb. Every single major part of this motorcycle, with the exception of 5 individual parts, everything else on this motorbike had been homemade. Now, the 5 parts that Mr. Traub had purchased with his own money, being the seat, carburetor, magneto and the 2 wheel rims, this was the only way that they could age this motorbike. The experts would put a year of manufacture based on them 5 parts as 1916. So in 1916, or thereabouts, Mr. Traub has designed possibly one of the earliest 80 cubic inch 3-speed transmission kickstart operating motorbikes, not just in the whole of America, we're talking the whole of the world. But more important, this bike was 21 years ahead of Harley Davidson's 80 cubic inch, 9 years ahead of India. The American male and female cycle bigger, better, faster. Had this gone on sale in 1916, instead of being holed up in the wall, it probably would have sold like hotcakes, putting Harley and Indian out of business during the Depression. Google this bike, I will guarantee it will come up as the world's rarest motorbike. Any questions? Yeah, why was this bike put in the wall? No one knows. However, 1916, the following year, 1917, America declares war on Germany. Traub is actually a German Jewish name. North Carolina Street was a German immigrant area. The likelihood is America has been supporting Britain and the British Commonwealth, Australia, South Africa, New Zealand, Canada and India. They have been supporting them by giving them arms, ammunition and equipment since 1914. America would say, no, we're going to stay neutral, we're not going to get involved in the European war. However, by 1917, you will see the sinking of the Lusitania, the world's largest ocean liner. 1,195 people would die in May of 1915 on that ship. 128 were Americans, one of them Americans, Alfred Vanderbilt. So what happens is America would protest and was actually paid compensation. What you will then see is the government have been aware that the Lusitania have been carrying ammunition and explosives. And so they said to the arms industry, no more to be sent over on ocean liners. So they started stockpiling it on an island called Black Tom Island. Have you heard of Black Tom? Black Tom Island, on the night of the 30th of July 1916, before America declared war on Germany, had 2 million tons of explosives, ammunition, mines and ordnance on barges, rail track and in warehouses. The first explosion went off at 2:05 in the morning. That was loud enough to wake up the guards on Ellis Island, a neighbouring island, and would start evacuating the immigrants and their families to the far side of the island. The second explosion, had the Richter scale been used, was equivalent to 5.5 on the Richter scale. The Statue of Liberty's arm is now jammed up against her head. It would be the last time you would ever go for a meal in the restaurant in the flame, and she was shrapnel wounded all the way down her cape. For the next 2 hours, ordnance and shrapnel would land on and around the Statue of Liberty. But that weren't the big one. The big one was the third explosion. That was felt 100 miles away in Philadelphia, the shockwave. It was powerful enough to rip the 4-inch brass doors off of the cathedral in Manhattan, breaking windows all the way into Pennsylvania. This had been German espionage before you declared war on Germany. If you're interested in Black Tom, also look at the Newlands explosion that happened in 1917. Truly amazing. And of course the final straw would be Chancellor Zimmermann from Germany sending a secretly coded telex to Mexico saying, if America declares war on Germany, we in Germany will support Mexico by giving you arms, ammunition, equipment to invade America from the south, reclaiming Arizona, Texas and New Mexico. This was the final straw. That telex, which was given to the American government by the Secret Service, they would leak it to the press. Public opinion went against the Germans. You would declare war on Germany. Now, of course, what would happen is, I would once say, this bike was put in the wall so these 2 boys could go back to Germany and fly. A lady in her 80s would start to weep. I had to stop what I was doing. I gave her a tissue and I sat down for the next hour and a half and was informed that when she was 16 years old, her name changed from Traub to her husband's name. She informed me, Traub being a German Jewish name, these boys would rather fight for the Americans than ever go back to Germany. Wow. She said that she should know because her father and grandfather had told the stories of the Jewish people being persecuted by the Germans even before Adolf Hitler came to power. Windows being broken, Jews being beaten up and murdered in the street, being spat at in the street was a normal thing. Tills being ripped off the counter, shops being looted. Had these boys experienced that persecution, possibly that would have been the reason when they realised that your country had been supporting Britain and the British Commonwealth, your steel stocks were rock bottom. You had to support your 2,000 troop army by building it up to 2 million. Remember, you've got to guard the southern borders just in case, as well as sending troops. So brass was in short supply, steel and copper, as well as aluminium. The old gangsters' trick of hiding their ill-gotten gain in the wall may have been the only way to prevent this from being confiscated and melted down. Now, why didn't it ever come out the wall? Well, on the 11th hour of the 11th day of the 11th month, 1918, was this the right time to get the bike out of the wall? Probably not. The steel stocks were still rock bottom because all the equipment taken over to Europe would have been left in Europe, given to the French, the Belgians, the Dutch, but never to the Germans. But also you're going to see that the German troops were dying mysteriously. But they couldn't let anyone know about it because they didn't want the Americans and the British. But on the other side of the battlefield, the American and the British troops were dying mysteriously. But they couldn't let the Germans know. A neutral country in Europe, Spain, we don't care who knows. Our 16 to 29-year-olds are dying like flies with a flu-like virus. The media grab hold of the Spanish flu. All of a sudden, when the troops are coming back to America, to Canada, Australia, South Africa, New Zealand, Britain, Germany, they're taking this flu-like virus with them. All of a sudden, you will see more Americans killed in the Spanish flu pandemic than Americans killed in the First World War. North Carolina Street severely hit, immigrant area living in close proximity. Was this the right time to get the bike out of the woods? Probably not, because of course by 1919, less than a year after the end of the First World War, Indian come out with that fabulous new bike, the Indian Scout. Engine and gearbox bolted together, 600cc, 3-speed transmission. That bike is so good that if you're here on the 1st to the 5th of July, you will see it being ridden around a vertical wall called the Wall of Death. It is truly amazing. And of course, Harley Davidson didn't get the big slice of the pie they were getting in the Second World War, so they've fulfilled their contract. And if you look over the back there, you're going to see a Harley Davidson with the green box on the back of the rack. That bike is 1000cc, capable of probably 95 miles an hour. It has got 3-speed transmission, electric headlight, electric tail light, electric horn, electric spotlight. All of a sudden, had it not been for the First World War, the window of opportunities for this bike to put Harley and Indian out of business was phenomenal. However, by the end of the First World War, even if they got it out, how many Americans would have bought a German sounding bike? And so that may have been the reason why the bike was left in. As it is, the workmanship is absolutely stunning. Again, on the 2nd of July this year, it's our 20th anniversary. I can guarantee this bike will be started up probably at least 2, 3, 4 times. This workmanship on this bike is just stunning. What's this for? You're absolutely right. In them cold Chicago mornings, you would draw petrol from the petrol tank, just putting a few drops into the priming cups, opening it up, and of course it will allow neat fuel to go into the, pull the decompression lever, and usually on the first or second kick this bike will start up. If you could imagine 106 years ago or more, these boys sitting down, designing a motorbike, their vision was so forward thinking. Even then, they knew you Americans needed a small metal box on the top of the petrol tank. They knew mobile phones, loose change, and cigarettes needed to be put somewhere. And so the only other item that came out the wall was this one spanner. You can actually see every single file mark that was made so that this fits neatly over these seats and over the spark plugs to remove, clean and service it. And once that was perfect, heated up cherry red, put into carbon deposit and then quenched into ice cold water. Just truly amazing. The world's rarest motor. Any questions?
Oh, that was great.
There we go.
Thank you.
Enjoy.
Awesome.
Some history there.
This one, 1916,
Fantastic.
1916. But this one has got a monoshop.